Good afternoon, I'm Eyck. I'm the executive chef at Charting Clubhouse, responsible for all the Western cooking, Western food in there, so in our Bistro Canter, Centurion restaurant, and also overseeing Ladies Purse. I'm glad you joined me today. Today we're cooking a dish which is very close to my heart. It's risotto. Today we're actually going to cook a white mushroom risotto, but I love any risotto. Ever since I done my first competition, I think it was in 1999 in London, when I worked at Claridge's, I've done a watercress risotto with sweetbreads and summer truffle, and it won me the Risotto Chef of the Year in the UK. And then actually, funny enough, 2012, when I came to Hong Kong for the first time, when I worked at Derby, I also entered the Italian risotto competition here in Hong Kong, part of the World Summit, and it was me in the final and 8 other Italian chefs. And I actually won the competition with my cauliflower risotto, seared scallop, pickled raisin, crispy capers, and pine nuts. So you can see I feel very, very passionate about it. Today we're cooking something a little bit more simple, white mushroom risotto. Obviously, most important part is the risotto rice. There are, generally speaking, 3 types of risotto rice available. Arborio, the most versatile of the risotto rice. Then we have cannaroli, which is regarded as the king of risotto, and my personal favorite is Vialone Nano. Slightly rounder, slightly smaller corn, and this is my favorite. Arborio, it's the easiest to cook, whilst with cannaroli and Vialone Nano you need to experiment, because obviously when it comes to risotto, minutes matter, because we want it nice and al dente. Al dente means to the bite, a little bit of resistance. We have some nice white mushrooms. We have some dried mushrooms, which I soaked in a little bit of water, and some Madeira. Mushrooms and Madeira is a good flavor combination. These are the dried ones, so Zeps are very, very good. You can also get Zep powder. We're using some black trumpets. Don't be afraid. If you want a really intense mushroom flavor, you need to use dried mushrooms to get that flavor. Like in any risotto, butter, parmesan, essential, some onion, and we garnish the whole thing up with a little bit of toasted pine nuts to sprinkle on top, and a little bit of celery leaf. We have a little bit of thyme and some bay leaf as we cook the risotto. Risotto, when it comes to cooking risotto, any Italian mama, it's obviously an Italian dish traditionally, any Italian mama, she will never leave the stove. Once she starts cooking risotto, the next 20 minutes, she's not leaving the stove. She's stirring, she's putting love in. Because what happens is, as we cook the risotto, the moisture goes in the rice, the starch of the rice comes out, and that stirring gives it that nice creamy texture, which is a top quality sign of risotto, which is what we want. You're peeling the onion, finely dice it. If you want, you could also use some garlic. I'm doing it without garlic because the mushroom flavor is already very, very intense. But this is up to your liking. Nice and sharp knife. Mine could be a little bit sharper, so that's why I'm a little bit slow today here. Cut it vertical into 2 or 3, depending on the size of the onions. Then you hold it together. This piece bothers me here. This is not what we want. And then as you cut down, just hold the ends together, and you see don't try to be too quick at the beginning, if this is not something you're too familiar with, because trust me, once you cut your finger, the fun is gone. Okay, so we have the onion here. Half is enough. What we then need is a pan over medium heat. A little bit of olive oil in. And then we add the onions. This process is almost the same for any risotto. It doesn't matter what you cook, pumpkin risotto, mushroom risotto, cauliflower risotto. The base, if you go into a restaurant, to 99% is always onions sweat off, some put garlic in, and then risotto. Because usually for the service, the secret for the service, we cannot cook this every time fresh when a guest comes to the restaurant. So from the service, we actually have a mise en place where we half cook the rice, and then we just finish it off as it comes, as the guest comes and orders it. There's some places out there, especially Italian restaurants, who take so much pride in this dish. They will cook it a la minute, but it's very, from a service point of view, it's actually quite challenging. So we don't want any color on the onions, just translucent. This will take you about 3 or 4 minutes. Don't rush this process, because we want the onion soft and we want the sweetness released from the onion, which goes into the risotto. The beautiful thing of risotto is usually everything stays in one pot. So all the flavors you put into the risotto, there is no straining, there is no taking out, no throwing away. Everything you put in here will stay in the risotto and will give it the flavor. And when it comes to the washing up, of course, you have only one pot to wash up. One important thing I forgot to say, you can use vegetable stock if you want, if it's a vegetarian risotto. I'm using chicken stock, and when it comes to cooking risotto, the stock doesn't have to be too strong, because obviously as we reduce it, the flavor intensifies, and if this is already too strong and salty, then it will overpower your risotto. But the stock should always be below boiling point and when you add it to the risotto, to give it a perfect texture and also speed up the process. As I said, risotto is a very simple dish, so extra care should be taken with each step you take. Onions are sweating. Bay leaf, I like. It's a very universal ingredient in my cooking. Maybe not universal, but in my cooking it's a very important ingredient. Mushroom and chopped thyme, also an ideal flavor companion. It brings out the flavor of the mushroom and adds a little bit of another layer to it. Nicely chopped, that goes in with the onions. You should always, what I call dry herbs like rosemary, marjoram, thyme, you should always sweat off a little bit as well, gently overheat, so it releases all its oils and flavors into the dish. Whilst basil, parsley, dill, tarragon should always be added at the end, just before serving to your dish. So our onions, they look done, they look translucent, they sweat off. The aroma of the thyme, the bay leaf and the onions, very nice. What we now do is add the rice, the risotto rice. Risotto rice is round corn rice, so it's not like jasmine rice or any other rice. It's round corn, it has a higher starch content. And as I said, that starch content will be released into the dish and gives it a creamy texture. Also, you don't need to wash your risotto because you don't want to wash any starch away from it. Okay, so this is a very important part as well. As I said, risotto, simple dish, but many steps that are important to take care of. Because now we're going to coat each rice corn when we stir it quickly and toast it in the olive oil. Each rice corn gets a coating of oil around, so that will help obviously later the texture. We don't want a big lump of risotto. We want a nice creamy risotto that spreads, and we don't want a big lump. So this part is actually very important, that you stir your rice so it gets a coating. Each rice corn gets a coating of the olive oil around. What we then have, the mushrooms we soaked in some water in Madeira, if you remember. The stock you keep, this is flavor. Yeah, so this, we take the mushrooms out, just chop them up a little bit. And that goes in with the risotto now. So the rice The rice has been coated. This one we keep, we're going to add at a later stage. This is a quick wash. Very good, so now we stir all this, the mushrooms are in there, the rice, the onions. Already looks pretty amazing and even smells more amazing. And then the whole thing, again, optional, up to you. Some people like to cook it. I almost cook every risotto I cook with white wine, obviously for religious reasons or preference. You can do it without alcohol. Again, it adds another layer of flavor into the dish. And the white wine, again, when cooking with alcohol, it's important that we always reduce all the liquid and we're just left with the essence, the aroma of the wine. So this whole process, once we start in the pan, everything takes, depending on what rice you use and what heat you use, takes about 16 to 20 minutes, depending on the risotto. So that's the time you should calculate when preparing this dish. Our stock is simmering away there. The white wine is almost reduced. And at this stage we add the mushroom water, which we soak the mushroom in. You can see it's quite dark, quite brown. So it took up all some of the flavor from the mushrooms. And now we start adding the first stock, chicken stock or vegetable stock if you use vegetable stock. And what we do is, as you add it, you add ladle by ladle, and you want to just cover the risotto each time just with enough liquid to cook. Because obviously risotto, especially when it comes to about 16 minutes, every minute and every moisture is important which we add. Because as I said, we don't want to drain away. So if you add too much moisture, especially at the end, the chances that you will have to drain some of this away if the risotto is already soft. And this is not what we want. We want all the flavor we put in that pot go into the risotto, and it's not going to go to waste. Bubbling along nicely. So what we do while the risotto is cooking, and you have to stir it at least every minute, every 30 seconds you have to stir it. And what the stirring does is, as the starch comes out of the liquid, out of the rice, and we stir it, it thickens and it gives it a beautiful texture, and you stir that creaminess and that starch all around. So what you end up is with a very creamy risotto. Shame you can't smell this, because this smells pretty amazing. So what we have then, we have another thing. Usually I saute a little bit of wild mushrooms to put on top of the risotto afterwards, just for presentation. So any mushrooms you like, use them. There is no such rule. I wouldn't necessarily use shiitake mushrooms for this risotto. This is not the flavor I think is the best combination, but chestnut mushrooms, girolles, chanterelles, zeps, very, very good, right? As you can see, the liquid has evaporated and has been absorbed by the rice, so now it's time to add the next layer. And this process you probably have to repeat about five times whilst making that risotto. And again, back to our mushrooms. So any mushroom you like. You you can use, and all we're going to do is I'm going to saute that in a little bit of olive oil, touch of salt, pepper, and that goes on top of our risotto. So now it's the third time we add some stock, and we're about 8 minutes into the cooking process. And a very, very professional chef can actually tell by the way your risotto looks if the rice is still too hard, or if it's close to being al dente, to where we want it to be, just by the appearance of the rice. So this now is our fourth time, if you counted right, and if I counted right. And we have for one more, and that should just be doing the trick. Like when cooking risotto, the beginning of the risotto is almost unique, not unique, almost identical everywhere in the world, with your onions, with your olive oil, with your rice, with the flavoring going in. And so is actually also the finishing off. So to me, there is no mascarpone in the risotto. Some people like to put mascarpone or other stuff in there to make it creamy. There is no need. If you take care and precautions and put love into cooking this will be the creamiest risotto you will find. So generally, I always finish my risotto off with some cold butter and some parmesan. And this process the Italian call monte. And this is just literally 30 seconds before you serve it. You add your parmesan, you add your butter. Some people shake the pan so not to destroy the rice, or you just very, very gently stir it. And also when you serve the risotto, it shouldn't just be one big lump. As you serve it, as you put it in the plate, it should always be served in a deep plate, usually. Unless it's for aesthetic reasons. Some chefs put it on a flat plate, but usually it's in a soup plate or deep plate. The risotto should run. As soon as you have a risotto in a ring that holds its shape when you pull the ring off, for me, it's not necessarily the best risotto. For me, a risotto, as you put it into the plate, it should actually run and spread out. This looks good. We are about 3 minutes away, and as I said 5 times, this is our final time to add the stock. And that should do the trick. Just to recap a little bit while I'm waiting on this. Very important, the stock cannot be too strong, because obviously everything you put in there, and the parmesan has salt in there and is quite strong. The stock cannot be too salty or too intense, because it will overpower the risotto or actually make the risotto too salty. Do not forget the parmesan has a high salt content, so that's why you haven't seen me putting any salt in yet, because usually I season this after I add the parmesan if it needs seasoning. Take out the bay leaf, it's done its trick, the flavor is in there. And while your risotto is about 2-3 minutes away, we can actually start the process of sauteing the mushrooms. So in a pan, a little bit of olive oil. Obviously olive oil, Spain, Italy, are big producer. Greece are big producers of olive oil, so it's an essential part of their cooking. So our olive oil is nice and hot, not too hot. You don't want it to burn. You don't want those essential oils to go up in flames. Into a pan. Mushrooms I always season afterwards because the salt will draw out the moisture of the mushrooms, and with the moisture comes the flavor. So I always season my mushrooms afterwards. A little bit of pepper you could put, but salt always comes at the end. You just want a golden brown. And you see all the different shapes and texture. It's a beautiful thing. You know, you could add some parsley or a little bit of chopped thyme, but because this is already such a flavorsome dish, I don't want to interfere with any more flavoring of the mushrooms, and I want the product to speak for itself. Now you can put a little bit of salt. We have a little bit of pepper. Can be out of the mill. I'm quite like this mignonette pepper because I'm a big fan of pepper. They only take about 1 or 2 minutes. And the good thing is, our risotto is done. So now we turn off the heat. Yeah. But this is what we want. The moisture is all absorbed. It's nice and runny. It's translucent. It doesn't stick. Mushrooms are done as well. Looks like it's my lucky day. So at this stage, like I said before, we add the cold butter. Don't be too shy. 2 good pieces for this. And the parmesan, grated parmesan. And then some people shake it like this to incorporate everything because they don't want to destroy the risotto. They're worried if you stir it gentle, it will just do the trick as well. But I have to say, this smells and looks pretty decent. As chefs, we're always a little bit critical of our work, so I don't want to say, oh, wonderful and fabulous. So I'm quite analytical, but this is like tasty looking and done. So now at this stage, I'm tasting it. Food needs to be tasted. The risotto has just this little resistance as you bite in the flavor, the earthiness of the mushrooms, the parmesan, the butter, all coming together. Very, very good. Like I said, we have a soup plate, and now you see what I'm talking about. I put the risotto in, and it spreads. Yeah, it doesn't stick. It doesn't. It's not a big lump. It's nice and translucent. Now we arrange the mushrooms on top. To your likings. I have a few little celery leaves because, you know, these are what I consider earthy flavors. So I'm always looking at flavor pals that work with this. So celery is a good combination. And then we have some toasted pine nuts because obviously mushrooms usually grow in the forest. and pine nuts. You know, obviously pine trees are in the forest, so I think this is a nice combination. Those, they have a quite high fat content. All I did is roasted them in a pan or in the oven for 2 minutes. Usually don't put them in the oven, my advice, because they're quite expensive, and I've seen even many professional chefs will get them in the oven and come back after half an hour when they're black. Just keep them on the pan, toss them, turn them, roast them a little bit for 1 minute, so that oil roasts and brings out the flavor of the nuts. Little sprinkle on top will also give it a little bit of texture. And there you have my big passion, risotto, wild mushroom risotto with celery leaves, sauteed wild mushrooms and some toasted pine nuts. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed making this dish with me.